All right. As far as anybody else knows, Jasmine, we have not done this once already and failed miserably when the Zoom meeting neglected to convert. So let's pretend we're doing this for the first time. Joining me now from her palatial estate in Oakland, California, it's bassist, guitarist, drummer, vocalist, musician extraordinaire, Jasmine Watson. Jasmine, how are you?
Hi there, TV land. I'm doing great.
Awesome. Yeah, as alluded to earlier, Jasmine and I attempted to do this interview a couple days ago, and Zoom fucked us, for lack of a better term. The stupid thing didn't convert. So, shouts to Jasmine for being willing to do this again and go through all these silly questions with me yet again. You're a good friend.
And I'm going to pretend like it's the first time you're asking me them too. So
Absolutely.
it's going
So,
to be great.
Jasmine, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I just had a job interview that I'm excited about that seems
Ooh,
good. And, you know, I have lots of free time. So why not record this for a second time? And
absolutely. What else are you going to
I don't
do?
know, just today, I'm going to make some tacos. I'm going to probably check on my plants. I'm going to play some bass with you.
Yay.
Maybe, I don't know, we'll see.
What time should I be over for
Quarantine.
tacos?
Oh, it's doesn't matter. We can just talk forever.
No, for tacos.
Oh, what time should you come over for tacos? I would say about 4:20.
Outstanding. I'll see you then.
Just kidding.
So I think if folks know you, Jasmine, it might be because Torso is probably the highest profile thing that you're doing right now, but you also play bass in Urban Sprawl, who are also
Yes.
blowing up a little bit. You sing in Screaming Fist. You play guitar in Siamese Twins and Composite.
Yes.
And you pre-pandemic, you had full-time jobs that you did. What are you doing with all your free time now that no bands are playing out and you're stuck at home all the time?
Well, I go on walks and listen to podcasts. Um, my roommate Laura and I have started playing music occasionally with a band called Zodiac that I play drums in and she plays guitar in, and it's very like hardcore, like East Coast centric. Um, and that's been really fun to kind of get my chops up on drums. And
Awesome.
Laura writes really cool riffs, so that's also really exciting to get to hear and write those songs with her. Um, I'm walking dogs now. You know, the trade show industry has pretty much collapsed. You know, giant international trade shows aren't really a thing right now. So I've gone back to my former love of walking dogs and dog sitting. And that's been really nice because, you know, it's just a small handful of friends that are my clients. So it's really nice to get to see those dogs that I really love and occasionally even see the friend that lives with the dog. And, at a safe distance with masks on and all that, you know, we're taking this seriously over here.
Of course.
But yeah, it's been good.
Awesome. Um, how did your bass journey begin? I know your dad played music because you inherited some cool gear from him. I think that's how I found out your dad was a player.
Yeah.
How did your journey begin and how did you end up on bass?
Yeah. Well, my dad got me a guitar just before freshman year of high school, and it was an acoustic guitar, and he taught me the chords E, A, and D, which meant I could play Gloria. And, I never had lessons. So besides him kind of teaching me a few chords, I kind of learned by looking up tabs to punk songs that I liked and like learning to play a Propagandhi song and just stuff like that, or like a Cure song on my guitar. But the thing is, even when I was learning those songs, I was frequently learning the bass lines and playing them on the guitar. Um, and then eventually in high school at some point, my friend Mike Sliff gave me a bass, and it was some crappy bass that someone had left at his house with like a broken truss rod and really high action that someone had painted with a paint pen, powder blue and black like nautical stars and flames on it. You know, a very mid 90s like pop punk vibe. And so I was given this bass for free, and it's what I learned on. And I think as a result of having this bass with the really high action, my hand was really strong, or like, learned to play on this thing that was hard to play. So when I got a normal bass later, it was actually really easy. But in terms of having bass kind of be at the top of the list, like my bread and butter as far as the instruments I play, um, I want to say like that it was a thing that I was drawn to, but at the same time, it was also a matter of just situation where
Mhm.
once I moved to the Bay Area in 2007, the band that I joined that was actually a part of the punk and hardcore DIY scene here and went on tour was Neocons, which I played bass in. So it was this thing where once people knew me as a bassist, that's what they asked me to do in the subsequent bands. So it was like Neighborhood Brats asked me to play bass. And then, it just went from there. And then, especially once I joined Torso in 2014, being in a band and playing with a drummer as solid and as good as Giacomo really helped me hone my technique. Like, really
Mhm.
was able to lock in on the triplets, was really able to, like, someone like him that plays the role the same time every time, accents and all, I could like lock into that and like strum the roll even. So it really, him being as solid as he is allowed me the space and security to really lock in as a bassist on that kind of rhythmic stuff. And I think from that, not to give him all the credit, was already good, but uh, he really helped me develop into the player that I feel like I am now and like get way better.
That dude's pretty
Yeah.
good. We can
That's
give
my
him
bass
some
journey.
limited credit. Um,
Yeah,
well,
definitely.
there's so much in what you said that I wanna dive into. But let's first get into the fact that you're self taught and yet your technique is so on point. I feel like most punk bassists, um, we flail a little bit. It's just like it's all about how it looks, and it's all about playing fast, and you look cool and you play fast and all that stuff, but you never, like, your technique is always solid. And how do you do it? How do you do it? Especially given that you're self-taught
First,
and that you must have arrived at this by trial and error more than anything else.
yeah. Well, first of all, thank you. Second of all, I guess I'm a very methodical person.
Hmm.
Like when I was learning how to skate, and I'm still learning how to skate, I'm still very much a noob. It was like once I learned how to do like a backside kick turn, like a 180 kick turn, I was
Hmm.
like, okay, well now I gotta learn front side, which is like not most people's like leap to go from like this kind of easy thing to this very difficult thing that even people that have way more skill than I do can't do.
Hmm.
Um, I'm very methodical, and even in the beginning, when I was a total noob, I would always use my pinky,
Hmm.
always use my pinky. And I think there's something to be said for the fact that I have very small hands, and not very small, proportional to me as a person that is only 5 foot
Sure.
tall. But I am a small person, so my hands are also small compared to most bases. So I think I had to, already being a person that was methodical and wanted to use my pinky as I thought I should, but then also being a smaller person that later got completely normal sized bases, if anything, bases that some people consider on the large side. It
Yes.
was a thing that I had to do as a part of just being able to play, I think. And then and just sticking with it. And I think having like a decent ear and understanding how certain things sounded, like really playing, like having that feedback loop of like playing and hearing and just doing it for long enough that the technique sort of falls into place. And I understand that a lot of times that leads to improper technique,
Hmm.
but I think in certain ways I was really lucky and was able to find some technique that helped me be solid in that regard.
Yeah, it's always one finger per fret, like I always see do it. The thumb is always anchored on the back, and you're always playing with the meaty pad of the finger. Like a lot of times when I'm playing fast and sloppy, like I'll just start doing this and throwing the fingers around. But you're always never cheating, and it shows. I mean, it shows in your playing and how it sounds and what you're able to accomplish. It's awesome. So
Thank you.
let's
That's
talk
really nice to
about
hear because, you know,
no, go ahead. We have a little bit of a delay.
oh,
We're just gonna
sorry.
have to work with it.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say that's really nice to hear because as a self taught person, a lot of times I don't even know that I'm doing something right until someone like you tells me. And obviously, like, I don't want people telling me that shit all the time. Like, it's not coming from you, a friend. It's not paternalistic the way it can and has been from other people.
Yes. I can only
But yeah,
imagine.
go for it.
Well, the torso is half non-male. I'm sure you get plenty of things like when you guys show up for a gig, you're like, "Oh, are you here to set up merch, or is your boyfriend playing tonight?" I mean, I'm sure you have no shortage of horror stories like that.
There's definitely been some. I mean, granted, like the Bay Area punk scene, I think, has always been more inclusive than some others. Like even when I was in neocons 10 years ago, the Bay Area scene, like the hardest moshers, some of the best bands, all of them had women in them.
Mhm.
And like the hardest moshers were women and non-binary people and mostly POC, which is like a really cool thing about Bay Area and Bay Area punk and hardcore. And I remember going on a tour with neocons in about 2010 or so, and literally for an entire tour, being pretty much the only woman in every band on every show. Like literally, maybe in Western Mass, we played with a band that Megan Miner is in, and just stuff like that, where it was like just being shocked and thinking like that the state of Bay Area hardcore was the state of hardcore,
Right.
and realizing like, oh, no. But leaps and bounds, like honestly, like in the, shortly after that, that changed dramatically. And then you had bands out of Boston like Firewalker, and, just from there, it's been like, definitely leaps and bounds of improvement, and always room for leaps and bounds of even more improvement.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
but yeah, definitely, it's actually been a pretty decent journey in terms of people not doing the whole, oh, you must be the girlfriend bit.
Mhm.
Except for when we were in Eastern Europe, we were playing this fest called Play Fast or Don't, which I think is like a fastcore, like grindcore festival.
Mhm.
And they had us play like last, like it probably like 2 or 1 or in the morning. And I think it was like, oh yeah, put the straight edge band on last because they'll still be sober and able to fucking hold their instruments or something. But it was like a thing where, we were loading off the stage, and these men were like grabbing gear out of my hand. And I just assumed like, oh, this is just the stage crew. They're just helping. They want this to be a quick turnover or whatever.
Mhm.
But then it turned out that wasn't the case, because they weren't grabbing the gear out of Keith or Giacomo's hands. And they made the comment to Keith about like, why are you making them get your gear? And he's like, that's their gear. And they just played, in reference to May and I like carrying things off the stage. So generally it's actually been pretty smooth sailing in that regard, or
Mhm.
maybe just people don't say it to my face.
Yeah,
And they're just thinking it until they see us get up on stage.
they would be wise not to say it to your face, Jasmine. So let's talk about how Torso came together, because you guys are now on Revelation, which is fucking awesome. I'm super hyped. And so is Urban Sprawl. So, and y'all have like is it a split thing or just like a split promotion that's happening? Let's talk about that first.
Oh yeah. So both Torso and Urban Sprawl are putting out 7 inches on Rev, and they will both be coming out, I believe, in December. It's that whole thing.
Awesome.
Like we already got the test presses, approved the test presses. So now it's just a matter of waiting for the pressing plant to turn that over and see when that comes.
Yeah.
But basically they will be co-released, but they are separate 7 inches.
Right.
And, both being bands from the Bay, sharing a member, and then, but also being friends, we've toured together. We just had this really fun idea to do kind of like a promotion for the Battle of the Bay, like the 1989 World Series, where it was the A's versus the Giants, and which is actually extra fits the band, not just because of the San Francisco Oakland connection, but also because Urban Sprawl, Taylor and Ian are both big Giants fans, and May, who grew up born and raised in Oakland, she's a giant A's fan. She's a big A's fan, and like you see pictures of her like being like a little kid with her A's hat, like at the game with her grandpa, and like
Nice.
authentic. And we're like all really nerding out and getting excited about, the homage poster to the 1989 World Series Battle of the Bay poster that we did. And yeah, it's been an exciting thing to have come to be.
That's awesome. I saw that on the gram the other day. Y'all killed it. The artwork is insane. It's so good. I'm super hyped for that.
Shout out to Kettner.
That rules. Let's talk about how Torso came together and how y'all ended up on Rev, because I'm going to say you are not a typical Revelation band. You're not a typical straight edge band. Like I said, like it's half non-male identifying people. Y'all are not moshcore. It's more like D-beat stuff. Like, who's how did you guys come up with the creative brief that's going to be like, we're going to be a straight edge band, but we're not going to play straight, we're not going to play straight edge hardcore? If I'm not in any pejorative way, but like y'all are not playing like the fast thing and then the mosh part and then like a typical straight edge band.
Definitely. I mean, we do love straight edge hardcore and youth crew. It's definitely things that we have loved and enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, Keith and I were already friends, and he was already at the house a lot just by virtue of A, he was dating my roommate at the time, and B, they had a movie night that we had at our house that was at first a zombie movie night that morphed into Epic Rewind, which was mostly older horror movies, but really it was just like any older movie. And actually the first movie we showed was Encino Man, which still pretty good.
A stone classic.
Yeah. And then Keith and Giacomo were friends because Keith's previous band Punch had gone on tour with Giacomo's previous band Holy, so they were already friends. And Giacomo and Holy had gone on a tour of the West Coast with Punch, and then half the band, Tazio and Giacomo, stayed here in Oakland for a little while just to be like, hey man, we're already in the country, let's just stay longer and get to know a bunch of stuff. And while Giacomo was here, he ended up dating someone, and so then he would come back for kind of long periods of time. And so on one 3-month stay, we're like, all right, you play drums really well, I play bass, Keith plays guitar, we're all straight edge and vegan. We've all the three of us have never been in a vegan straight edge hardcore band or any band like that, however maybe close some of the previous bands had been. Mm-hmm. Like, this will be a fun little project, and you're here for 3 months, we can knock it out. And we had the idea to do a D-beat band because that was music that we were all into. And as much as I love hardcore of all kinds, and that falls under that thing, I just had never fully identified with the most, like the thing that people would say to me when they found out I was vegan and straight edge would be like, oh yeah, like Earth Crisis. And I had never even really listened to Earth Crisis. And so when I listened to what it sounded like, I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's like not at all like the vibe of what I usually listen to. I've always been on like the punker side of mm-hmm. like hardcore and stuff. So it was like a thing where it's like, hey man, we're like this is what we're vegan and straight edge, but this is what we like, and that's not, so let's just make it happen. It's not a coincidence that the three of us like this stuff mm-hmm. and are vegan and straight. So anyways, that came together, that happened. And we knew of May. She had not so long before moved back from Pittsburgh, and once again, one of the better moshers in Oakland, was fucking pit boss May. And then also she had been singing in a band called Ritual Control, so we knew that she had pipes, mm-hmm. and we knew that she was vegan and straight edge, and I knew she was cool. Actually, the funny story is that we had both stayed on the floor of a friend's house in Texas, and for Chaos and Tejas, and I didn't have a blanket, so I was using a towel, but it was warm enough that the way I wore it was kind of like a diaper, and we called it diaper towel. And that was like essentially the first like dumb, not that funny, but very funny to us joke that we kind of made. And it was kind of like it was like the foreshadowing of the fact that we were going to be good tour mates, Yes. And cut to 6 years later, and we're best friends and have gone on a bunch of tours and been in all sorts of countries together. And yeah, we recorded those songs, we wrote the songs, recorded the songs, played a single show in the Gilman store, and thought that would be the end of it. But then some things lined up with bands that Keith and I were each in. We're supposed to tour Europe, and we're like, hey, if 3/4 of the band's already going to be in Europe, fuck it, we just fly out one person and Torso tours Europe. It's like mm-hmm. everything's falling into place. Cool. Like, I know we're a new band, but this is just the things are falling into place in a way that it makes it'd be dumb not to take advantage, right? And so we had planned out this tour when both of our tours had gotten canceled.
Oh,
So now it was a thing where it's like, okay, well, now we're doing a torso tour and we're not sharing the plane tickets with other bands.
right.
So we made the tour longer to kind of help recover our costs. And, so our fourth show ever was in Milan. and and we went on I think it was a month-long tour. And anyway, so that's the thing, is like, this band that was supposed to be a project, things just kept falling into place for us between like hard work and playing and just resonating with people. It's just continued to roll for 6 years, and I see it too, that it's going to continue to roll.
That's awesome. I think that's one thing that people who don't play in bands don't realize, is that you're only as good as your band's inside jokes. I mean, that's really what being in a band is all about anyway, right? It's not the, you know, at the end of the day, that's what I look back on. It's how good were the inside jokes.
Exactly. And actually, speaking of inside jokes in the love of horror, the name of the band Torso came from the teaser trailer for the movie Torso,
Damn.
which is like a kind of like a proto slasher, kind of a giallo. It's kind of like has enough things about it that are weird that it's like doesn't fall super into either category. And it's not even like the best giallo or slasher, but I think it still has a very important place in history. But the thing is, the trailer, the announcer narrator guy says torso so many times that it was like this inside joke where we would just be like, torso, and just like say it to each other all the time. And I think even without the joke, just the name stands on its own, but it's nice to kind of have that backstory and united by a collective love of horror, which if you go to our Instagram, we actually posted a horror movie for every day of October with like a little why we love it, or maybe just like a little plot synopsis or something.
That was super fun to watch along with that. There's a bunch of things that I hadn't seen that I put on my list. There's a bunch of things that I had seen that I agreed with. So
cool.
That was a
blast. It was fun for us too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This next question is, I already know the answer. If you could only play one bass for the rest of your life, what would it be? Pretty sure I know what the answer to this one is. Grab it.
It is the Guild B301 that I have right here. This is the bass that I'll play for the rest of my life, permitting, the world permitting.
Bury you with that, put that in the coffin with you?
Yeah, next to my Viking ship. But like, it's got this massive bridge and it just sounds good. And I just really lucked out that this was my first real bass that I was like, this is my bass. And in the years since, I've like tried to buy like cheaper, less precious backup basses to maybe have to take on tour or do stuff like that with, and it's just always falls short. And I'm always like, I don't know, man, I kind of still just want to bring the Guild on tour with me, even though I'd be really sad if anything happened to it, and I don't necessarily want to risk flying with it and like having it in a van and like all that stuff. But no tour bass that I have bought comes even close to looking as cool or sounding as cool.
It's definitely its own thing. I played them for years in Kellenwald City. That pickup is crazy. Like, it doesn't sound like anything else. It's got this growl to it that it's not it's not better or worse than other things. It's got its own vibe. And you did not make it easy on yourself. As you said earlier, as a person who is on the small side, it's a large bass in this dimension, and that neck is like half a baseball bat. It's like, it's no joke. It's like somebody sawed a baseball bat in half. It's super fat and thick. Feels good in my hand, but like, as you were alluding to earlier, I bet you really have to be mindful of your technique to get around on that neck.
Yeah.
It is chunky.
I bet you it's maybe where like the need to anchor came from, and why I like, developed that claw, the anchor.
Yep.
Because I have to, or there's not going to be enough pressure to suppress that string.
Yeah.
Another thing I'll say about that I realized through playing your basses and going back and forth is that my action is actually pretty high.
It is.
Which I think works for me because I'm like such a, being in hardcore bands, I like picked really hard. And as I played longer, my technique became a little more refined. But, I think that also made my hand stronger, and now, we've like tuned it up a little bit. But yeah, it definitely is a large and heavy bass where
Yes.
even just like holding it, like having it on the strap, like if you don't like keep your hand on the neck, it'll just go.
Yes. Strangely balanced thing. Um, and I think the high action probably contributes to your tone a little bit.
Mm,
I mean, like you said, your pick hand is pretty aggressive, and there's like this percussive element to it. But I think having the strings that far off the neck probably helps, especially with the fast stuff. Probably helps each note sound more cleanly. Like if you had a lower action where the string was clacking against the frets, like a Steve Harris style, and then closer to the
yeah,
pickup, you would sound you wouldn't sound like you would sound different.
totally. I definitely didn't realize that until I started playing a variety of basses and like borrowing stuff, that I was like, oh, okay, the way I play, it ends up being clacky when I play on other basses. And it's because
Hmm.
I learned to play on this bass with higher action.
Yeah.
And also, I just got it refretted. So it was like high action plus really low frets.
Yeah.
So it was just like this combo that was like, I could like, my left hand, as you were saying, like I try to like keep that solid, but my right hand could just be like when I played with neocons, if you see videos of me in neocons, I literally play like this,
Yeah.
and granted those songs were like more like straight chord, like very simple mid-tempo hardcore, like really
Hmm.
punchy,
Hmm.
and really fun and catchy in that way. But it meant that I could play with my whole arm to,
Yes.
for like this, to be like aggressive and fun about it, Um,
You didn't
it,
need
so
to
it,
be now. You need to be economical playing with Torso because it's way more intricate, right?
yeah, exactly. And that's where I like got that whole like
Yeah.
the little intricate, like, get the triplet down or whatever. But having that bass when I was in neocons meant that I could be going like this
Yeah.
and not be like just clacking up a storm. It was still
Right.
just like pretty clear notes, note info and all that.
Well, let's talk about the rest of the rig. What happens after the B301?
B301 goes into an acoustic 320, and that typically goes into an Ampeg 8x10. And oh wait, this is important. It starts with the pick.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, this is like a thing that it's just
It's
it's
those
a
gray
floppy
gray
pick.
Dunlops, right? The
Yeah, a
nylon
gray
ones.
Dunlop, and it's a 70.73 milliliter, and so it's like way floppier than you'd expect for like a bassist pick.
Yeah.
But I think being that I do play the kind of like quick picky way, it really, I don't know, it's like I slowly started getting floppier and floppier picks as I like realized what I like the most, and that's like kind of what I've come to really stick to. And then I felt pretty vindicated because other um people that I respect the way they play and like the way they play were like, oh yeah, I use a floppy pick too. People are like, oh yeah, look, I have the same pick as you. And even though he's a guitarist like Eric Montanez, who's got like the fastest hand in the East, you know, like he also uses floppy pick. So I was like, oh hell yeah, team floppy pick.
So one interesting thing about you is there's no pedals involved, not even a tuner, nothing on the ground. You're just going straight into the amp.
True.
How does that work? How do you get a sort of a grindy tone out of that? And then follow up question: what do you do when you're playing on borrowed gear, which happens for fly-in stuff like in Europe and what have you?
Yeah. So there's a couple things. I definitely am going to get a pedal now because the last tour I went on, Old Reliable, my star player fell. But basically, that guild does not go out of tune.
Hmm.
It can literally be like I don't know. It can be like I've been playing another bass and that's been in the case for a minute, or we're on tour and we like drove somewhere and whatever. And whenever I go to tune up my bass before a show, it's in tune, and I'm like, how is this possible? And so for a long time, I kind of just like I would still tune up before, check it out before, and then just play. And I was like, being a person that's like somewhat frugal, and I already have like a pedal in my guitar setup and like the other bass setup. I was like, oh, I don't really want to have to buy another pedal. I don't know, like $60 is kind of a lot of money, and just. And then on the last tour I went on, I think it was in February. It was Urban Sprawl and Torso together. Someone was like, wow, I can't believe you don't have a pedal in your line. And I was like, oh yeah, the bass just stays in tune. And it was that show that something happened, like a mosher bumped into my tune and peg, and I got and I was like, no. So it's just like trying to like tune really quickly in the middle of the song, and like keep going or whatever. And I'm a person that's really into being efficient, and obviously we're all going to mess up sometimes, but I never want that mess up to be as a result of a lack of preparation. And so I was just like, man, why am I playing around? I need to get a fucking pedal and put it in there, because I am not I'm not a baby, you know? So I'm going to get a pedal, but clearly the pandemic has made it so I have some time on that in that regard. But what I will say is, playing on borrowed gear, because I don't know if the growl, it's like the pickup, the bass, the amp peg, like I think those three things together, it's just like I've always had a nice growly warm tone with like plenty of like note info, and like the notes come through, right? But then I'll go on tour and I have to borrow an amp or a bass or both, and then it's just everything just doesn't sound as good to me. And I just haven't really found a pedal yet. I've like taken like pictures when I think someone sounds pretty good. I'll like take a picture, but I haven't quite found a pedal to bring on tour with me so that I can get the growl and the, punchiness that I expect at home on the road. And that's always like the thing on tour is like the first show, you like dial in as well as you can. You're like, okay. And then like, it's like every show just like trying to like adjust. And since I never have to do that, it's really, I feel like I have a good ear, but when it comes to that stuff, I haven't had a chance to develop it, actually, interestingly enough, Torso went on tour with Low Vision last year. And I guess in Japan, a lot of the way the venues run is that the venue has a backline. Sure. So Low Vision has essentially typically played on borrowed gear. And so it was just incredible to see them at the start of every show, just kind of like play through this like kind of like warm up tune, and then just be like locking in their fucking tone on the amp while playing, and just sounding amazing every night, and just being like, damn dude, I should really work on developing my ear to like that kind of EQ stuff, So I think I have a lot of room to grow in that regard.
That's cool. There are for sure some acoustic preamp clones out there that I wonder, like, that people have put them in a pedal format. So I wonder if there's like an acoustic 360 preamp clone pedal that you could just throw in your case and go through.
Bring on tour.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You don't seem to be a huge gear whore like I am. You've been to the house, you know what it's like. But is there a piece of gear that you've parted with in the past that you wish you could have back?
I haven't gotten rid of a ton, and I also haven't bought a ton. The one thing I think talking about pedals that I got rid of that I wish I would have given more of a chance, I don't know, maybe if it's good, was a tube screamer pedal that I got rid of. And I think I tried it and it didn't work for what I needed at the time. And so I sold it. And part of me wonders if like, cause that was like 10 years ago, I wonder like if I had kept that, if I would have been able to kind of like dial it in. Cause I have since then heard good things about tube screamers again. And I'm like, did I like get rid of that too soon? But ultimately I'm not even like that worried about it, cause that's easy enough to find again. Sure. And like I said, my at-home tone is pretty dialed in with the rig I have. Tour pedal, to kind of help replicate my tone. Maybe getting that preamp, that tube preamp will, or pedal preamp will be like a good way to do that. Yeah, but yeah, I haven't gotten rid of a bunch, I know that I like the acoustic 320, and once I got that, that's like what I've kept. And I do worry that one day it's going to die on me. And I low-key was like, man, why am I not like keeping an eye out for those and just buying them whenever I see them, and as they die, just like rotate them out like shark's teeth or something. Cause I don't know, but I think I've heard that like solid state amps are like a little harder to work on than like tube stuff. And, or with that one specifically, like sometimes with certain things die, it's just like not even worth fixing. But hopefully I can just find multiple of those amps or something.
Yeah, that's the other cool thing about making your rig modular like that, is if you were to get like an acoustic 360 preamp or whatever, and you could replicate your tone that you have with the 320, it kind of wouldn't matter what the power section is. You could run a straight power amp, you could run like a GK, you could just run it in front of an Ampeg and you would essentially still sound like you.
That's great. Yeah, I need to look into that. Yeah, that's the thing is like as a person, like you said, I'm not like a huge gear person. Like I think part of that just comes from the fact that in the past, just the jobs I've chosen have always been jobs where I was like essential enough to keep my job, but not essential enough to be able to like fuck off on tour for 6 weeks at a time,
Right.
a couple times a year, or 2 weeks at a time, multiple times a year, where most places are like, you got 2 weeks of vacation. That's it, you know? And I'm like, oh, cool. Well, I'll just leave and you don't have to pay me or something. But they're like, no. And it wasn't until like I got the job at Local 510 last year that I was like actually finding like saving a lot of money. And I've always been like a very frugal person. So, you know, I always had to be very like picky about the things that I was going to drop a lot of money on. And as much as like I will sometimes drool over more basses and more amps and more cabs, I have to like, I had to really like keep it together. But, you know, maybe once work returns, I'll be able to get all the gear I want.
Nice. All right, let's get into the fun stuff here. Everybody has a go-to Soundcheck riff, or like when you sit down, when someone hands you a bass, or you go to Guitar Center. What's yours?
Well, for Soundcheck, I'll usually kind of just like ride a single note, like either like E or A, just kind of like ride it to make sure, like with the triplet, like to make sure that I'm getting the articulation that I like and the distortion that I like and the tone that I like. But then for funsies, when I'm just like at a Guitar Center or like on a new bass, I'll always play the verse from Trooper. I'll always just play the Trooper by Iron Maiden, basically. I'm sure, I mean, you know that. Every time I come over and I try a new bass, I'm just like,
It's so fun.
Yeah, it's
so fun and satisfying.
Steve Harris writes songs that are really fun to listen to, but also really fun to play.
Yeah, I mean, he's the reason that I started down this path at all. I heard the opening part of Invaders off Number of the Beast. I'm like, what the hell is that? I need that. What is that? I had no idea that a bass guitar could sound like that. Holy shit, it changed my life.
Yeah, definitely. He's great.
Probably tell me about an iconic Jasmine bass line. What does a Jasmine Watson bass line sound like?
Okay, well, I think a Jasmine bass line, should I pull it out, the bass?
Do it. Let's hear it.
All right, a Jasmine bass line, I feel like sounds like, you know, a willingness, or like I feel like a thing that maybe this is just an excuse, but having a lot of restraint, like maybe not necessarily feeling like, just as, you know, I think we've talked about how bass a lot of times is like the marriage between the drums and the guitar, right? Like you get the note info and the melody from the guitar and the rhythm from the drums, and you're like this unifying force in the middle that glues everything together and makes everything sound great. And I feel like having a lot of restraint is like, I think, a thing that I have. And it's a thing where when I've talked about having like simplicity in certain things and people being like, oh no, you don't talk yourself down like that. And I'm like, I'm not talking myself down. I'm respecting the fact that I feel like understanding and not having too much ego to know when less is more, you know, and just being rhythmic and holding a single note or just playing what the guitar is playing is totally fine, you know? Sorry, I'm just like trying to continue to talk while I do this.
You're doing great. You're doing much better than I would.
No, dead air.
I tend to trail off in strange places when I'm trying
to do it. How's that for volume?
Ooh, that's great.
Okay.
Extremely audible. It's awesome.
All right, now let's change the camera angle.
Yes, give me that beautiful bass.
So this is a Torso song that has like a part where it's like I'm holding a note and then goes into a part where I'm like doing the triplet or whatever.
Cool.
I don't think you'll be able to see my hand for the first part though. There we go. Okay. So that's like a pretty typical me line with like the triplet, the hand and everything. But then another one that I really like is this, it's like kind of fun and groovy. It's called You Stay on That High Horse. Let me get back down there. Okay. And that's like an intro to a song, so it's like the changes in tempo are part of like the, you know.
For sure.
And then it cuts. But
the pinky was on full display in that first one. Like I said, you dedicate one finger per fret and you never deviate, and that's like,
yeah,
that's the goal.
Yeah, and like I said, like even as a Ute that was just like doing like literally just like the most basic like.
Yeah.
Like so many people when they're doing that, it's so slow and easy that they literally will just go like. And I'm like, I don't care how slow and easy it is. I need to build that pinky and the whole hand,
Yes.
you know. And so
Yeah.
from very meager beginnings, it lays the foundation to so much more down the line, you know.
Yep. It's unlearn those bad habits early, or work on the fundamentals, and you will be free to do cool stuff later down the road. I wish, speaking of that, like that's something I wish I had known day one. I had developed lots of bad habits instead. Is there anything you wish you'd known early on that you had to unlearn, or is there like one simple trick that you can impart to people to help them make them a better bass player?
Well, first of all, just for any musician ever, or not even musician, if you like music and you go to shows, is get earplugs. And, you know, I know a lot of people's excuses that it doesn't sound as good or it doesn't sound right or this or that or the other. And to that I say, get good earplugs, not just earplugs. You know, like invest in your future, because I know a lot of people that even just in their 30s or 20s who are already experiencing the effects of not wearing earplugs. And I was actually at a show in Pittsburgh during Skullfest, and we were all outside, and I was like, oh, they're playing Cardi B in there. And my friend was like, how can you hear that? And I was like, I wear earplugs. And it was, you know, he thought it was a pretty sick burn. But, you know, it's, if you care about music, which is supposedly why you're there, either playing or watching the bands, like it should follow that you will probably continue to care for a long time. And you're going to be really bummed when you're, you know, not able to hear stuff, or just the different ways it's going to affect you. And it's like such an easy solution, or such an easy little thing that you can change, that is like such a long-term boon, you know? So that's one thing.
Awesome.
I feel like I've always been like enough of a nerd that I've actually worn earplugs for a long time, even before I wore earplugs before it was cool. But but another thing, and this seems like really simple, but I still like remember the show. I was probably like 22 and playing on borrowed gear, and the way the stage was set up was that the cab was in front of me. And it seems like such a silly thing that like now I would see that and be like, no, we need to fix this. But I was like young enough and didn't know enough that I was like, okay, whatever, this must be fine. And it was like one of those shows where it's just like so stressful because you can't hear yourself, and like, you know, it just really throws you off. And just little things like that, like knowing what you need to have, like all the ducks that you put in a row to help ensure a good show, right? Like practicing, tuning up, having the cab behind you and be able to hear yourself. Like all of those little things that to people that don't know it doesn't seem like, to those of us that know, it doesn't seem like anything at all. But to someone new, maybe they're not thinking about all that stuff, and it can really throw you off while you're playing. So those are like some little tips for like newer people. Like make sure you're in tune, have the cab behind you, make sure you can hear yourself, wear earplugs, make sure you have practice.
Yeah.
That's
yeah. If you want to be doing this for a while, protect your hearing, because they haven't figured out how to fix that shit yet. So they might at some point, but until then, you only get the one set that you're born with.
Yeah. And I want to be able to hear for a long time.
Heck yeah. All right, last question, Jasmine, before we let you go. You've toured extensively in the DIY and punk scene. You have to have like an absurd story from one tour or other that you can leave us with.
Yeah, I feel like I feel like most of these stories, I think, as we've like discussed before, is like it's usually either throwing someone under the bus by
Almost always, yes.
telling the story. It's like the whole like what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. It's like a lot of stuff that happens in the tour van. There's a lot of context, so most of those things I'll like save to keep to myself. But and I don't know, just people like not being able to find your guitarist, and it's because they like hooked up with the person we were staying with and are like naked, passed out at the house. And anyway, but here's like a wholesome story. There was one tour in Europe where it seemed like somehow every squat, every venue across multiple countries was making us burritos.
Oh boy.
And I think, hearts in the right place. Hey, let's make this California band feel at home. Let's make them burritos. And I think if you haven't had what you and I might consider like authentic or good burritos, you just hear tortilla and beans with tomato sauce and you're like, that's easy to make. But there's like so much like nuance to what is actually like makes it good, right?
Oh, yes.
And so like for me, I need like a thick ass refried bean where like if you throw that on the tortilla and you like turn the plate sideways, it's not going to fall off or roll off. You have a burrito and you like slam it down, it's going to stay standing in the foil, So but they don't know that. So anyways, like all of these burritos, in Scotland, England, Germany, Poland, it was all like the same kind of thing where it was like it was almost more like a chili, right? Like a 3-bean like thickish stew with like canned tomato sauce, like canned tomato chunks in it, in a tortilla. And so it was but fuck it, you know what? I gotta say, I appreciate being fed. Yes. I 100% like it's more that it's just like fun. I still ate everything and was like very grateful to be fed at all. But where it gets like even like a little more funny is that in one place in particular, the really charming, nice person that was the guy running the venue and the food and cooking for us was like, yeah, so I went to the store and they didn't have avocado. So I thought, pineapple. And I was like, cool. And hey, I ate that burrito, pineapple and all, very happy. But ultimately, like, it's still very funny to think of the leap to be like, okay, yes, pineapple and avocado, both fruit. Okay, true.
Tropical fruits,
how do you make the leap from like a very creamy, oily fruit to a very sweet and tart, like no fat fruit? They're like on opposite sides of the spectrum in terms of like flavor and texture. So it's definitely a very funny leap. And so that's a little tour story, a wholesome one.
that dude accidentally invented al pastor.
Dude, actually, right? Like, give me a gringo taco with the flour tortilla and all. Yeah.
Incredible.
And the pineapple. It's great.
Yeah, they it might be different now. It might be slightly better, but when I was living in England in the late 80s, there was zero Mexican food. You could not get a tortilla. You could not get even the old El Paso hard taco shells. The only Mexican food that I was ever able to find, I think there was a single Taco Bell franchise somehow.
Taco Bell gang.
In the entire country. I think it was like King's Cross tube station in London, and I was living in Brighton at the time. So I would, sometimes I would go to London solely to get Taco Bell, but other times I would always make it a point if I was going up there for a show or whatever to go to King's Cross and get the really bad, like bore almost no resemblance to the Taco Bell back here, but at least I could get like a hard shell taco.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, a cousin of mine from Mexico, she was living in France and then recently moved to Sweden with her wife, and it's like, she was telling me about the things like, yeah, you can find chilies, but it's this kind of chili. So you can like make Mexican food, but there's something slightly off about it because it's like you're using like, I don't know, just like a Haitian chili or like, I don't know, just like different, like in a different kind of bean. And so it's like, she can definitely get it closer than the squat burritos we were getting.
Yes.
But there's still just something like the coriander, the cilantro is like different somehow. And like, so it's definitely even if like say you have the recipe right, it's still difficult to replicate just because of the source materials, you know. Yeah.
Good stuff. Jasmine, thank you for joining us. I hope you can stay healthy and safe for the rest of quarantine. How can folks make sure that they cop the Urban Sprawl and Torso stuff when that comes out?
Okay. Well, we're pretty good about keeping our Instagrams up to date. So for Torso, that's torso.unofficial on Instagram. And for Urban Sprawl, it is Urban Sprawl HC. And then also Revelation Records Instagram will keep that up to date, and they'll probably have like the fastest, you know, once it's available, they're gonna probably have some cool packages, you know,
Yes.
so you can get like the records together for like a cheaper package price and all that fun stuff.
Awesome. And remind me the name of the new band, and do you guys have stuff to listen to yet?
Oh, the new band with Laura?
Yeah.
It's called Zodiac, and we do not have anything to listen to yet. Right now, it's just, you know, writing songs in the studio. It's just guitar and drums at this point, and maybe at some point when we feel a little more confident in our chops on these instruments that we don't play very frequently, we will invite a bassist into the mix, or maybe we'll just like, you know, record with just the two of us and play the bass and do the vocals ourselves. But we're a long way off from recording. I'll say that much.
Right on. And do you want people to follow your personal Instagram if they're interested?
Yeah, it is Malgoth_Malgrab. If you know, if you
one of the better
like
usernames on Instagram, I will say.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks again, Jasmine. Take care of yourself. Stay safe, stay healthy. Happy holidays and all that jazz. And we'll talk soon.
Stay clean.
Yes. Nixie for life. Hashtag not fizzing.